I've always had a knack for finding trouble, or maybe trouble's just had a knack for finding me. Either way, as I pulled into a nondescript town nestled amidst the sprawling forests of the American Northeast, a familiar tension gripped me. It was the same eerie quiet I'd felt in Eldridge, the unsettling calm before the proverbial storm. The town had no name on the map, just a set of coordinates in an anonymous tip that landed in my inbox. Unexplained disappearances, the email said. Objects moving on their own. A malevolent trickster haunting the woods. The air was thick with the musk of damp earth and decaying leaves, an aromatic reminder of the dense forest that lay just beyond the town's edge. Pulling my collar up against the chill, I set out to do some reconnaissance. As I wandered through the labyrinthine woods, my eyes scoured the surroundings. That's when I saw them. Tracks, but not any animal tracks I'd ever seen. They were grotesquely human, but tinged with a monstrous quality. The claw marks etched deeply into the soil as if to claim the forest itself. Something caught my eye near a cluster of thick brambles. A symbol, etched into the ground, faint but deliberate. It was a series of concentric circles, surrounded by runes that were foreign to me but spoke of dark mysticism. A calling card, perhaps? Returning to town, I stopped by the local watering hole, trying to glean what I could from the tight-lipped residents. "You'd best stay out of them woods," one grizzled old man finally told me, a look of genuine concern clouding his eyes. "That trickster don't like visitors. Takes things, it does. Sometimes takes folks." As I headed back to my makeshift base, his words clung to me like a lingering mist. Whatever this trickster was, it had the whole town bound in a shroud of fear and superstition. And something told me that getting to the bottom of this would require more than just physical prowess. It would be a battle of wits. Back in my room, I laid out my array of tools, each one chosen for a specific kind of hunt. But as I pondered my armory, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something crucial, an X factor to level the playing field. And for the first time in a long while, the hunter felt very much like the hunted. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, and when I opened them, I made my decision. Tomorrow, I'd hit the library, delve into the folklore surrounding this entity, and arm myself with knowledge. This goblin, this trickster, had played its games long enough. The time for reckoning was near. The musty aroma of old books greeted me as I stepped into the town's modest library. It was a labyrinthine space, filled with sagging shelves that groaned under the weight of generations of knowledge. Behind the counter was an elderly librarian, her spectacles perched precariously on the edge of her nose. "Looking for anything in particular?" she inquired. "I need information on local legends, folklore, particularly anything that talks about a trickster in the woods," I replied. Her eyes widened just a fraction, enough to tell me I was on the right track. She directed me to a section filled with local history and folklore, a veritable treasure trove of clues hidden amidst weathered pages. Skimming through several dusty volumes, I finally stumbled upon what I was looking for. A chapter dedicated to a malevolent goblin, a creature born from a curse placed upon a deceitful man who'd cheated his way through life. It spoke of a creature with an affinity for riddles, a being that delighted in outwitting its opponents before claiming its prize. Just as I was engrossing myself in the details of the goblin's habits and weaknesses, a whisper broke my concentration. "You won't find all your answers in those books, you know." I looked up to find a woman, probably in her 40s but carrying an ageless wisdom in her eyes. Dressed in earthy tones and carrying a satchel filled with what looked like herbs and trinkets, she introduced herself as Eleanor, a local herbalist. "My grandmother passed down stories of that creature," she continued. "It's real, and far more cunning than any book can describe." Intrigued, I closed the book and followed Eleanor to her shop, a small cabin infused with the fragrances of various herbs and roots. She handed me a small pouch filled with what she called protective charms, designed to ward off dark entities. "The goblin respects the challenge of a riddle, but do not expect fair play," Eleanor warned. "Take this. It's a charm that might just tip the scales back in your favor." The charm was an intricate weave of silver and emerald threads, holding a small gem that pulsed with a subtle energy. It felt both ancient and alive as I tucked it into my pocket. "Thanks, Eleanor. I have a feeling I'll need all the help I can get," I said, my hand closing around the charm as if drawing strength from it. Returning to my base of operations, my mind buzzed with the newfound information and the numerous strategies that began to formulate. The goblin was cunning, strong, and not bound by any sense of fair play. But I had knowledge, and possibly a trump card in the form of Eleanor's charm. As night began to envelop the sky, casting the world into darkness once more, I reviewed my plans. A regular trap wouldn't do. This would be a contest of wits. It was time to delve into the mind of the trickster, to beat it at its own game. With a new sense of purpose and a plan forming, I prepared myself for the encounter that awaited. The setting sun bathed the forest in hues of orange and purple as I ventured into the woods, my bag packed with supplies and the protective charm from Eleanor securely in my pocket. The thick canopy of trees seemed to absorb the light, turning it into an eerie, ethereal glow that only deepened the shadows. Recalling the goblin's fondness for riddles and mental games, I set up a makeshift camp near a clearing, littering it with objects that served as both bait and components of my trap. A series of rigged tripwires connected to bells, a locked chest filled with shiny trinkets, and a small chalkboard displaying a riddle for the creature to solve. As I settled into my hidden vantage point, the forest took on a life of its own. Owls hooted from the treetops, and distant rustling told of nocturnal creatures embarking on their nightly hunts. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting for what was about to unfold. And then it came, a sound that didn't belong. A soft, mocking laughter that echoed through the trees, followed by the faint jingle of bells. My tripwires had been triggered. Emerging from the shadows was the goblin. It was grotesque yet fascinating, its skin a mottled green, its eyes a piercing yellow. It moved with a disconcerting grace, almost gliding as it approached the chalkboard and studied the riddle. A challenge, I do so enjoy a challenge, it sneered, its voice a mix of malevolence and glee. Tension hung thick in the air as it pondered, its eyes narrowing. Finally, it spoke the answer. Correct, but that didn't surprise me. What came next would be the true test. Satisfied with its answer, the goblin turned its attention to the locked chest, reaching for it with greedy hands. Just as it touched the lock, however, a burst of light erupted from my pocket, the charm Eleanor had given me. Cheating, are we? The creature's eyes narrowed, its voice tinged with malice. I stepped out of my hiding spot, holding the charm high. It seems we both have our tricks. For a moment, our eyes locked in a battle of wills. Then, quicker than I could react, the goblin lunged at me. We tussled, its strength astonishing, my every move countered as if it had anticipated them. Despite the charm and my preparations, I was losing. In a desperate gambit, I managed to shove it away, the force sending us both tumbling to the ground. Gasping for air and realizing the depths of my underestimation, I scrambled back to my feet. You may have won this round, Hunter, but the game has only just begun, it hissed, disappearing into the forest, its mocking laughter still lingering in the air. Bruised and humbled, I made my way back to town. The goblin had been more cunning and powerful than I'd anticipated. My traps, my riddles, my physical prowess, none of it had been enough. It was back to the drawing board, but with a renewed sense of respect for my adversary. As I lay in bed that night, Eleanor's words echoed in my mind. Do not expect fair play. And she was right. But as I drifted into a restless sleep, another thought crept into my consciousness. Two could play at this game, and I was far from conceding defeat. With the dawn light filtering through my window, I spent the morning revising my approach. Clearly, physical traps and straightforward challenges wouldn't cut it. This goblin was a master of mind games, thriving on the mental duel as much as the hunt itself. I needed to switch gears, to dive deep into the psychology of this creature. I spread out a map of the forest on my table, marking the locations of our previous encounters and the symbols I'd found. Patterns began to emerge, a grid-like layout hinting at a method to the goblin's madness. But what caught my eye was a central point that intersected multiple pathways, a natural amphitheater surrounded by towering trees. An arena, I muttered to myself. It made sense, a stage fit for the final showdown, one where the creature could validate its cunning before its intended audience. Me. My eyes then fell upon the charm Eleanor had given me, its small gem glinting in the morning light. I'd been so focused on using it as a defense that I'd overlooked its potential for the offensive. Calling upon memories of folklore and legends, I crafted my own series of riddles, each one designed to poke at the goblin's weaknesses. Conceit, overconfidence, and the very notion of trickery itself would be woven into my challenges, inverting the contest to question the creature's abilities. Equipped with my new stratagems, I made my way back to the forest, reaching the designated arena just as the sun began its descent. I set up a series of chalkboards, each displaying a riddle more complex than the last, and suspended a leather pouch from a high branch, the gem from Eleanor's charm nestled inside. It was the ultimate prize, but also the ultimate trap, rigged to drop only when the final riddle was answered. As darkness enveloped the forest, I took my position, my heart pounding with anticipation and anxiety. Time stretched into an uncomfortable silence, the forest again seeming to hold its breath. And then, just like before, a discordant laughter rippled through the trees, announcing the goblin's arrival. "Back for more, are we?" It grinned malevolently, its eyes darting toward the chalkboards and the suspended pouch. "High stakes tonight, I see." Ignoring its taunts, I gestured toward the first board. "Shall we begin?" As the goblin moved from one riddle to the next, its initial smugness gave way to a furrowed brow and clenched fists. My riddles were doing their job, gnawing at its ego, forcing it to confront the possibility of its own limitations. Finally, it reached the last chalkboard. Its eyes narrowed, its lips quivering as it muttered possible answers under its breath. The tension reached a breaking point, a palpable force hanging between us. Then, with a triumphant snarl, it shouted the correct answer. Above us, the pouch fell, but as the goblin reached out to catch it, it burst open, releasing the gem which glowed with a blinding light. I seized the moment, reciting an incantation Eleanor had taught me, channeling the charm's energy. Ropes of light shot from the gem, ensnaring the goblin, pulling tight and holding it fast. But the game was far from over. In a world teeming with enigmas and terrors, this was but a single battle in an ongoing war. I stepped back and drew a circle around the creature using a mixture of salt and crushed herbs. Ingredients Eleanor had assured me would amplify the charm's magic. Placing the charm in the center of the circle, I took a deep breath and began. "I speak without a mouth and hear without ears. I have no body, but I come alive with the wind. What am I?" "A riddle within a trap," it mused, its eyes narrowing. "Intriguing. Your answer is an echo." I nodded. "Correct. Your turn." The goblin smirked. "I touch the earth, I touch the sky, but if I touch you, you'll surely die. What am I?" "Lightning," I answered without hesitation. The goblin snarled, its form quivering as though struggling against invisible bonds. "Continue," it spat. "Feed me and I live, give me a drink and I die. What am I?" "A fire," it hissed, its eyes now glowing like hot coals. "Correct," I said, feeling the circle's energy intensifying. "Your final question." The creature paused, its eyes scanning my face as if searching for a hidden trick. "What has cities, but no houses, forests, but no trees, and rivers, but no water?" "A map?" I answered, watching its expression shift from anticipation to disbelief. With that answer, the charm in the circle blazed to life, casting a radiant barrier of light that engulfed the goblin. It let out a shriek, a dissonant sound that seemed to echo into other realms before it disintegrated into a cloud of dark mist, sucked into the charm itself, which now pulsed with a subdued light. I exhaled deeply, the weight of the hunt lifting. The circle had worked. The goblin was bound, not just physically, but also metaphysically, its essence trapped within the charm. Retrieving the charm, I felt its weight, heavier now, as if burdened by the dark soul it contained. As I left the forest, my thoughts returned to the dangers that still lurked out there, unfathomable creatures and unanswerable riddles. But they were challenges for another day. For now, the Goblin's reign of terror was over. Its malevolent games halted. It was a victory, hard fought and dearly won. Yet the thrill of the hunt was far from over, and I felt the undeniable pull of other enigmas, other challenges that lay beyond the borders of this small town. I returned the charm to Eleanor, explaining the Goblin's fate. She nodded solemnly, placing the charm in a lockbox filled with similarly enchanted objects. "You've done well, Lucas, but remember, each hunt teaches you something new. Don't become the one who is hunted." Her words lingered in my mind as I packed up my gear, already pondering the next hunt. With each victory, I was becoming more adept, but also more aware of the perils of underestimating my quarry. As I drove out of the town, the rising sun painting the horizon with shades of hope and promise, I felt an exhilarating sense of purpose. The game had only just begun, and I was more eager than ever to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Armed with the wisdom of the hunts that had come before,